Timothy, good to see you. Welcome to Yachting USA. What a fun experience this is going to be today.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, what a pleasure. So we're sitting in your new beautiful office at Pier 66.
Yep.
Look out there
It's amazing.
and you see these white boats. You see this new facility.
That's why we're here.
I get it. And the face dock, I think there's not a single boat in your fleet you couldn't put there.
There's a couple, but this face dock, and it's the reason why we're here, in even more than what you have in West Palm, we can get some of the biggest boats in all of Fort Lauderdale. The biggest boats can go here on this face dock, and bigger boats than they can even get in West Palm besides the Marine one. So we can do up to 110, 15 meters. Maybe Megan will get mad at me. Maybe 120 meters, it would sneak it in. Whereas you can't really fit a boat that big besides a few spaces in Miami or a commercial port.
Right. And you have the commercial port here too. I've seen some big boats right around the corner here. So they've really done an amazing job of renovating and building out the port there. The new hotel they've built there, the convention center.
It's super nice. This whole area, right, in this corridor of Fort Lauderdale has been growing, but at the moment with Pier 66 and that convention center there.
So we'll get this one on and off the table real quick because we talked about it a little bit ago, but Fort Lauderdale, yachting capital of the world. And it's funny because we have these conversations, and I know in a little bit when I'm over in Monaco, it'll come up again. And Monaco is hands down a gorgeous port city. It's the yachting center of Europe. I give them that. Not the yachting capital of the world. I don't think so.
Well, as two Americans talking, I agree. You know, you hear Europeans sometimes try to say that the capital is in Monaco, and you know, there's certainly, not to be disrespected, there's a lot of yachting industry in Monaco. It's a premier place to come in your big yacht. A lot of guys, owners enjoy that. But Fort Lauderdale, there's more. It just, you know, every serious company in this business has to have an office here, right? But we have manufacturing here. We have the crew industry here. So many senior crew have houses here.
Yeah.
We have the marinas. Almost every, as you said before, almost every yacht at one point in their year comes through Fort Lauderdale. Maybe not a few of the boats that never leave the Med, but you know, that's not what I'm talking about. The globe-trotting yachts, you know,
Great place for provision.
the brokers are all here. The builders are all here because in the end, still the U.S. is by far, by a long shot, the biggest market in the world, single market. And this is really where everybody comes. Even if you're coming from the West Coast or from New York or even the middle of the U.S., you come to Fort Lauderdale to kind of buy a yacht.
Right. And when you look at the way the yachting industry is growing, and it is growing, and all the predictions and all the statistics show that we're going to see more and more growth over the next decade or two. That's a given. So much of that begins here with owners that are acquiring their first 20, 30 meter yacht, falling in love with the idea of yachting, moving up into the 40 meter. And then eventually, if they're really in it, they go to 50 and 60. And where do you think, you know, with the exception of some of these guys that hit big home runs or own these big, you know, conglomerate, multi-billion-dollar companies, our core group of yacht owners originates? Such a phenomenally large percentage of them come out of the United States. And I think the incubation happens in areas like this where there's so much yachting potential and the opportunity to create a good first experience to encourage people to be in the yachting industry.
I mean, absolutely. You know, I'd say that more often than not, they do just what you said. They come up slowly through the sizes and gain experience, start with a brokerage boat, or they start with charter, then they buy a brokerage boat, then maybe they build a boat, and then maybe, you know, they come and build a Lürssen one day, you know. That's the typical use case.
Yeah.
But there's always exceptions. And through my career, I've been fortunate to be involved in a good number of boats. And it's mind-blowing, the boats that I've built for people that are the first boat they've ever owned.
I hear those stories. It is when you think about the first boat you ever owned, it's over 100 meters. It's like,
wow, it's really crazy. But it's a building boat, very significant vessel right now for someone's their first boat. And, you know, I love it. Sometimes it happens.
it's a great story. Yeah, it's a great story. So, Timothy, before we get deeper into that, give us just a little quick background into your entrance into what I call the wonderful world of yachting. You and I identified that we both grew up on the west coast of Florida, which is kind of the goal thing.
Go Mexico, yeah.
And I think if I if my research is worth the salt, you actually kind of started out running parasail boats and kind of enjoying a little life on the water outside of Destin.
It's amazing that you found that somehow. But that was my, I was fortunate to have a dad that exposed me to boats, so we grew up there just outside of Destin. My parents still live on the bay there. It's a beautiful place. Yes. And so I grew up sailing, and my first job when I was 16 was working on tourist boats in Destin. And so I got my, Coast Guard license, master's license as soon as I was 18, little 50 tons. So I was running little parasail boats around, which was probably still to this day the best job you can ever have. Out there having fun, driving a speedboat for, and getting paid. But I remember Lady Val, which was this West ship, which was built, I think up in Canada. They only built like 2 or 3 boats on West ship, to my recollection. She was a 130-footer. She pulled into Destin, and my jaw dropped. I was like, are you kidding me? That's the greatest thing I've ever seen. So I literally drove my parasail boat and followed this guy into Destin Harbor, and he tied up behind AJ's. So I tied up next to him and just was like, I can't believe this. The crew came off, and the owner came off, and I was just chatting with him, asking him about his boat. And he was like, he was an attorney, he had worked, representing Philip Morris or something. And he said, if I could do it all over again, I would do what these guys are doing. He was talking about his crew. He thought his crew had like the best job ever. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I was like, I'm going to spend my life in boats.
I love that.
Now, in the end, of course, I ended up on the business side, not on the operational side, but
that's all right.
That was an
epiphany for you.
Yeah, major point for me.
I love that. So where did you go from there? What path did you take into this industry?
Well, I think we were just talking about it. I ended up coming to university down here in West Palm Beach. Yep. Just to be able to be near the yachting business. So I went to school at Palm Beach Atlantic University, still there in West Palm.
Yep.
Right in the middle of downtown. And my goal was always to work in boats, right? So I read all the yachting magazines before really internet was a thing. You sound old. And so I read all the yachting magazines, and in the magazines, the companies that looked like they had the best marketing. So they looked like the biggest companies were the yacht brokers, of course, because they need to make themselves look that way. And it was Edmiston, Wyco, Nigel Burgess, Fraser, Kemper Nicholson. Yep. So I ended up out of college, really fortunate to go and work for Jamie Edmiston. Nick Edmiston was running the company still, but it was Jamie who I chased down and kind of gave me that first opportunity. So I moved to Monaco. I worked on boats for a little bit. Out of college, I ran some small boats in the Caribbean. I worked as a deckhand on a 60-meter new boat fed ship,
which was at Rassless.
It was a great boat at the time. It was like this. It was actually when Rassless was launched at 60 meters. She was either the 100th or 200th. She was in BI's list of largest yachts in the world. It says 60 meters. Now, hilariously, I don't think 80 meters makes the list.
No, that's scary to think about. So I'm curious, at that point in time in the industry, did you have to get your STCW to work on the boat, or were you able to come on board just because of your associations and other experiences?
I did go get my STCW because I was living down here working in the marine business, and I had been running boats, my summers and so, running small boats in the Caribbean and so forth. So I experienced around. I did have my STCW, but Rassless was private, so you didn't really need it. Right. And that was kind of STCW in those days in the yachting, at least to my recollection, not everybody necessarily had it. It was maybe only the charter boats.
Full commercially.
Now I think pretty much everybody.
Yeah. When I was working in the yacht management company that I put together over here a couple of years ago, we wouldn't even consider crew without an STCW and some other basic training, which I think is fundamentally important. This industry has grown up. The level of professionalism is real. And if we have time and the conversation allows that rabbit hole, I'll talk to you a little bit later about crew and how that factors into what we do as both yacht builders and professionals in our industry, because I think that's an important conversation. But going back to your
core, an interesting side note was I think in your earlier career, you were talking about that you worked in the Gulf of Mexico.
I did.
And when I went to get my STCW, it wasn't even offered really here in Fort Lauderdale. So I went all the way to, I think Bayou Battery, Louisiana or somewhere.
Kidding.
And so I got my STCW together with all these offshore oil boys. And they were like, "You going to work on what yachts?" And I've seen a yacht. I saw a Sportfish once, It was hilarious.
That's beautiful.
I really enjoyed it.
I love it. Yeah. Now here in South Florida, there's a number of maritime academies and organizations where you can get a good education. It's interesting because you talk about that commercial side and you take a look at Resolve Marine that dominate in the commercial side of the business doing, salvage work and mostly salvage work. Not at all yachting, but they do have the Maritime Academy, Resolve Academy, where they are actually training crew for yachts and are really making an entree into that space. So again, it's a resource that's here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said already, the professionalism of the crew these days it's not that it was unprofessional before, but it's just become so high.
Yeah,
and so these licenses and all that, it's great to have that ecosystem.
Yeah.
Support them.
So you moved to Monaco.
Moved to Monaco, yeah.
By that safe?
And not really. You maybe spoke a few words.
Right.
But yeah, so I moved from Monaco, but I wasn't there for long. I was there for about 13, 14, 15 months.
All
right. Working for Edmiston, and it was a great education.
That would be.
So
that would be. And that got you kind of ingrained in the brokerage side of things a little bit then, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't work as a broker. I worked as, I don't know if the brokers still have this these days, but they had what was called like a listing secretary, and which I was, which is basically the best possible training for a junior broker to learn about the business. My job was to keep track of every yacht that is for sale or potentially for sale and maintain or build a database. I think myself and a guy named Tim, I can't remember his family name, was doing the same for Camper Nicholson at the time. And really, this was how early this was, that a yacht brokerage firm would have a database. There weren't these yacht codes and all these online before. So what happened is before, if a client would inquire to a yacht broker, he just kind of knew off of his head what was around and available. There's no central place for him to look up in his computer.
Wow.
So it's kind of like the first time to say, I'm gonna scour everything on Earth and try to make sure that all the data of every boat, especially every boat that's for sale, is in our computer system, so that when a broker gets an inquiry, he could find it. And by doing that, I was already a boat nerd, so I liked it. But by doing that, it gave me just so much repetition that I became really competent with every statistic of every boat. And it was a great way to learn.
That's huge.
Nick Edmiston, to his credit, he has mentored so many on the brokerage side. He used to work around Camper Nicholson's for many years. And then when he founded Edmiston, so many of the boutique firms, yacht brokerage firms today, are founded by proteges of Nick, people that he brought into his company and mentored and taught as in the same way that I was taught.
We see that repeat and repeat in this industry, which I think is a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful.
If you're an entrepreneur, you get a great education if you get in the right group of people. And then when you feel like you're ready to scale, that opportunity is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after a little over a year in Monaco, you
Edmiston moved. I wanted to come back to the States. I'm American. And Edmiston was wanting to open an office in the US. So I went with a guy named Diego to New York, and we set up an office for Edmiston there. So that office is still there. It's in a different location, but that was probably in, I can't remember, 2008 or something. And so we did that, and I was bouncing between there and down here in South Florida as with Diego, getting that started. And at that time, Rodriguez Group, which for those of us from a while remember, they're no longer the company, but do you remember they were a publicly traded company that owned Camper Nicholson?
Yep.
And they had sort of invented this sort of sport yacht that is so common nowadays. But in those days, it wasn't. They kind of invented that whole genre. And they designed were building all the boats with Mangusta, with Leopard. So these were designs that they had created, and then they had exclusive right for the entire production of those shipyards. It was a really interesting setup.
It would be.
And they were publicly traded. I, at Edmiston, had been part of interacting with them, was supporting a sale of one of their boats. And so they were looking for a new person to do their sales for the Americas. And I was very young. I was 25 or something. And they reached out and asked me if I would be open to the job. So I took it, and I came down here to Fort Lauderdale, and that was my first exposure kind of working for a manufacturer doing their U.S. sales. So,
well, there's the education. The West Coast Florida boy comes to the East Coast here, and
doing Italian boats, built my friend's company, and I would spend my summer sort of in the Mediterranean, hanging out with Richard Dixon, Christopher Dixon, who are just so good to me. They were just gems of men. Just, they treated me like a son. Fantastic mentors. And it was excellent. But that was through the recession years. So this is like 2008, 2009. Those were tough times in boats, you know, a 30-meter sport boat, 40-meter sport boat. That is the market that gets hit the hardest, right? It's not that, you know, Lürssens, it's not that we're, you know, above recession. Everybody is susceptible to slow economies. But the price point that those boats were in was especially susceptible to the small business owner or whatever, that a guy that's a discretionary purchase, right? And so that market got
Well, what you just touched on, I think, is an interesting parallel, because you and I talked earlier about my previous career owning and being part of the operation of nautical structures. And in 2008, it was like a light switch was turned off.
for sure.
So about half of our production was geared towards the carvers and cruisers and hatteresses and smaller boats that were being produced, and other brands that are no longer with us. And about half of our production was in very large yachts, custom projects, big projects. And what saved our company was what I call the flywheel effect. That while we lost a big chunk of our throughput production work, what we had going on were dozens of large cranes, large gangways, large shell doors, custom elevators, unique projects that were, because we had a huge market share at that time in Northern Europe. So we were supplying Lürssen and the Fed ships and Amels and Hochfurt and a number of other, the occasional Benetti. Didn't do so much in Italy, but a lot in Northern Europe. And we were just breaking into the Turkish market then too.
Right, I think.
So, and then we still had some of the larger boat builders here in the United States who were supplying Delta, kept things going. Westport had things going.
Trinity.
We supplied almost every Trinity built.
I remember.
So all of that work kept us going, even though the purchase orders were starting to become less frequent. The backlog of what we had is the cash flow coming from that. And that kept us going long enough for the industry's recovery. And we took a collective sigh and kept going. But if we didn't have that business,
The big boats.
yeah, if we didn't have the big boats, we probably wouldn't have survived 2008.
Certainly the bigger the boat you build, the more it flattens out, you know, the ups and downs of the economy, the boom and bust cycle of boat building, because you're signing contracts that are 5 years.
That's right.
And so in 5 years, you probably go from a high to a low back to a high again, right? Whereas if you're building, you know, 30-foot boats, as you said, you know, you're
On a 14-month build cycle.
right. So there's a lot of risk in that long cycle, because you sign a contract, and if all of a sudden inflation hits you, right, over which we had recently through COVID,
Yeah.
you get slammed because you have 5-year obligation for a firm commitment you made 5 years previously, right? So that can hit you. But that long cycle does help you through these up and down cycles.
And if you're smart enough to have a commodity clause built into your contracts that allow you to make some adjustments for those big hits, that helps. Not everybody can get away with that. But if you can, you should.
Since the last years, more boat builders are trying, but I don't know how many people have been successful so far getting an attorney to let it happen.
Yeah, well, if you don't try, you'll never get, all right? Take away from this one. So I have to ask the question, what does an American office do for a European shipyard?
Yeah, so I've been a majority of my career in that exact role, doing the American thing. And I just had a meeting this morning with somebody talking about this dynamic. Because Lürssen doesn't have a shipyard anywhere, an office anywhere else, not in the Middle East, which is a major market for us, you know. And so why here? Same for Fed Ship. They have an office here in Fort Lauderdale, but nowhere else. It's a response to the fact that this market is the largest market. And so when it is, you need to be close to your customer. And in our case, someone with Lürssen, it's not that our customer is just the client himself. Our customer is the whole ecosystem around the client. It's of course the client or the principal, but it's his family office, his or her family office, and then the designer and the yacht management company and the captain and the broker.
Just said the whole ecosystem.
That whole ecosystem. And that ecosystem is very much here at Fort Lauderdale.
So let me ask you this question. If you can't answer it, I understand, but I'll preface it by the answers I've got from 2 other Northern European shipyards. In my interviews with Farouk at Fed Ship, and then interviews with Rose Dahmen with Dahmen Amel, Fed Ship roughly 65% of their clients are U.S. owners. Damen, it's closer to 78%. And Amels, it's about just under 70%. So you take that in the aggregate, and basically at least 2 out of 3 owners, maybe in some cases close to 3 out of 4 owners building in Northern Europe are American clients. Does that model fit with the Lürssen experience?
When I joined FedShip in 2011, the recession was still there, right? It was still recovering. Around 25% of the builds were American. It was
25
at the time.
Okay.
It was the recession, and so they very much are. When I left, it was 75%. And that's not. And I'm not saying that statistic to say that it was me. It was all you.
It was all you.
You know, these things are so complex. It's such a big team.
Yeah.
But that just shows you kind of how important FedShip especially. I mean, FedShip was formed around the American market.
That's right.
That's their.
I noticed, right.
Lürssen has not always been such a heavily U.S. focused company. As a matter of fact, before I joined Lürssen, they didn't have an office in the U.S. I think that probably 25%, if not less, of their business was coming out of the Americas. At the moment, we're 65% U.S. So, I want to say 65% not a U.S., 65% Americas.
Americans. Okay.
Yeah.
So, because Americas is more than just the United States. You got Canada, you got South America, you got Central America. It's there's a lot of wealth in all of these areas, and let's aggregate. Yep. I'm also aware of what has happened a couple of years ago with the invasion of Ukraine and the oil sanctions against Russia. I know the yacht management company I was working for lost, it's either 18 or 19% of our clients.
Oh, really?
And I believe Lürssen also lost some builds to those sanctions. So that couldn't have helped the big picture.
Well, absolutely. That shifted the picture. I think that we were fortunate that Lürssen has done a lot of business in Eastern Europe, right? Russia and Ukraine. And there's no question there. And it's a very important market for Lürssen. I think the timing was lucky a little bit whenever those sanctions hit, and that we didn't have a lot of business at the time in terms of new builds for the Russians. But certainly that's also helped that swing to the Americas. It's been fortunate timing, because you're right that when that market kind of got closed was when we started to build our exposure here.
Right. No, that makes sense. So what, in your perspective, draws the American client to Europe? Of course, we're talking about Lürssen and the concept of Northern European yacht construction and ship construction, because honestly, a lot of the boats that's being built in Bremen are small ships. You guys are crossing the threshold a little bit there, I think, in some of these new construction projects. But what is it? Why Northern Europe? Well, you are competing against Turkey. You're competing against Italy, obviously a huge shipyard focused country. Of course, you got the Netherlands kind of are with you. They're the people coming to Northern Europe are coming to either the Netherlands or Germany. What's your perspective on that? What drives that?
Well, one thing that you didn't hit on there is, why not America? That's its own conversation. I get asked that a lot. I would love to see American shipbuilding thrive. We know that outside of just yachting, I mean, obviously yachting, we've seen some iconic brands disappear just in the last recent years. It's a shame. But also in shipbuilding as well, right? America struggles. Like we're not able to build commercial ships. Our defense industry is hanging on by massive stingrays, right? They're not efficient. And that is a whole different thing that can be debated regarding the Jones Act, whatever. But I would love to see it. I would love to see American yacht builders revive, or maybe some new ones be built.
That's for saying that, Tim, because I tell people, when I got into this industry, I counted over 40 shipyards in North America building cruise-served yachts.
Right.
Of those, there's over 30 that were building over 100 foot, and there's less than 4 left since 1985, 88. So we've seen, and this whole time that we've watched the degradation of our new construction happen here in North America, we've seen the yachting industry take off. Yeah. It's not like the yachting industry stayed flat or dropped off. No, it's gone the other way. So we've lost all that market to Asia, to Turkey, to Northern Europe, to Southern Europe, So that's a hard one to get back. I'd like to think it could happen again. Let's hope that it does at some level.
But with your experience being a U.S. manufacturer, you know the challenges, but also the advantages. We are a country we're innovators. We're efficient. We're hardworking. We know how to build stuff.
Yeah.
So I also think that it's possible. I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility.
It's not. You got to have the right mindset. It would take one or two high net worth individuals to say, hey, instead of doing this build over there, let's go into this yard, put something together, and do it here.
Yeah.
I was involved, and I'm still peripheral involved with a group of people that are looking at building 40-meter yachts back here in the United States, aluminum hull vessels. That started earlier this year. Knock wood, maybe it gets some traction. We think it's a sweet spot that has some potential.
I think so.
So, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Because it is in our DNA. We're a maritime country. We've got a maritime heritage. We've got a can-do mindset when we put ourselves to it.
And all the trades you need to put a 40-meter together exist right here in Fort Lauderdale.
And that's true.
I mean, honestly, yeah. The only thing you don't have right now is aluminum, right? But even that, look, we could build a hole somewhere else in the country, and then that's what.
I was going to say, look at the Europeans. There's not a single Dutch builder that builds their own holes on site. I mean, no, Fedship owns DeVries owns Slob, but besides that, they don't even build. So we can build it anywhere, and then we bring the hole here, and then you outfit it here. Yeah, and all the outfitting skills are here. Yeah, that's part of the mindset. Actually, we were also looking hard at Savannah as a potential area to do it. So yeah, the resources are available, and we'll see where that goes. Because it is important to the U.S. market. And I think for the U.S. yacht person, there's plenty of business in the industry to go around, and it's good competition is healthy.
I think if all things were equal, if you had the skill set here and you could get the same quality in a very similar price, an American buyer would buy here every time. People would be happy to buy American. They don't have a problem buying European.
Right.
But it's easier to travel. It's easier legally to get your head around it. But also you're talking to people that don't, So going back to your question about why Northern Europe. With Lürssen, it's a little easier to defend this because specifically with our expertise with building the very large yachts, there are a few shipyards that, even though I like to say it, haven't built more than a couple boats over 100 meters. And if you're building a vessel that size, the investment is huge, and which means the risk is also huge. So the shipyard goes bankrupt, or that they don't know what they're doing, or it takes much longer, whatever. All of that.
And we've seen it.
Yeah, we've seen it. And it could happen to anybody. Lürssen's not, beyond risk. Building a yacht, especially the values we're at today, it's a risky endeavor for the shipyard, but also for the client. So the advantage of coming to Lürssen is there's few, if any, that have the deep experience of delivering over and over again, and without getting geeky and spending 2 hours talking about that. It really is. I call Lürssen, all other yacht builders, even the very good Dutch yacht builders, they're kind of like little crafts workshops that are building beautiful things. You go to Lürssen and it's a machine, right? It is so organized. It's like
German efficiency.
It's like a Mercedes factory, that's building ships. It's so the way the shipyard and the workflow and the throughput of the way the yacht is designed and engineered and built is so efficient, like a factory. Whereas even the very good Dutch builders that are now trying to build boats over 100 meters, they're still approaching it with that like workshop craftsman level, which is they can build beautiful boats.
Yep.
But they are lacking the systems and the processes that are necessary to efficiently build and make sure that there's no system-wide errors, right, that are necessary for the German industrial machine that is Lürssen.
Right.
It is unlike any other shipyard. It's very different.
Let me ask you this question, because when I was doing business in Germany a number of years ago, we were also supplying Blum & Voss, Lloyd Wharf, Nova Sprug. Those shipyards, well, Blum & Voss went out of business or were acquired, I forget which, but they're no longer trading under Blum & Voss, I believe. What's prevented them from scaling the way Lürssen has?
Well, Blum is now owned by Lürssen, as is Nova Sprug, is also now owned by Lürssen.
Okay.
And the difference is, why have those companies failed when Lürssen has succeeded? It's the Lürssen family.
Peter.
Yeah, these guys are just, there's nobody else like them. They are intelligent. They're wise. They're careful. They are, they do right by people every time. they have character, and that character bleeds through the way they do business. And that has caused them to be able to succeed. And the shipbuilding is a very difficult business, and the ups and downs of the business. And so they've been able to stay in business whenever other people have gone under. And then they've even had the reserves in those difficult times when others are going under to pick up those assets. Right. So then they're available for them to use them whenever things are good again.
We were talking earlier, 150th anniversary.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
That's real.
150 years, continuous ownership of the same family in the same business. Think about that. I don't know how many other times that happens anywhere. There's companies that are 150 years old, clearly, but I don't know if they're still owned by just one family continuously.
No, it's hard to imagine that. And they've gone through 2 world wars and all of the
so many ups and downs
that have happened in Northern Europe.
I've been working, and I really call it a pleasure. I've had the pleasure of working for these guys for 8 years now. And even in my 8 years, there's been 3 serious downs, three serious, most shipyards would go bust from it.
Wow.
And, COVID was a big one in terms of inflation. We had some crises with fires,
heard about that.
One of the most significant losses in maritime history. And yet they've endured. And, it's a lot of stamina and a lot of character and a lot of getting up again when you get hit, knocked over. And that's only in an 8-year period. Right. I can't imagine the history. So major respect for the Lürssen family.
Unfortunately, my only direct experience working with Lürssen hands-on was back in 1996 when Limitless was built.
Amazing.
And we built a really custom special crane that went out in the foredeck of that boat, still in service. When I say we, not nautical structures. And that's when Michael Bremen and I met each other and created a friendship. And Craig DeFoya was building the boat at the shipyard. And it was for me phenomenal because I couldn't imagine back then 96 meters. That was whoa, right?
Like you were saying, in 2005, was it 60-meter restless?
Right. 96 meter is back in 96, it was a hybrid propulsion vessel.
Right. Even today, people are still jumping up and down when they go to hybrid.
And a Vandenberg design. That design is still been saved.
One of the most beautiful yachts ever built.
Absolutely.
What an iconic boat.
It is. What a privilege. It was
still owned by the original owner. It's amazing.
What
was Greg until we lost him? He was still running the boat. So
no, it's the tenacity, those relationships, the way they work is pretty phenomenal. We started this conversation talking about here in Pier 66 and Lürssen here in the United States. This is, of all the places you could have picked up, Pier 66, just because.
We had the opportunity when we were setting up this, Lürssen's office here to really think. And Michael and Peter and I really had a discussion about where should an American office be? Should it be in New York? Should it be in California? Should it be here in Florida? And I just couldn't get away from my experience that South Florida, but Fort Lauderdale, even over Palm Beach or even over Miami, is the center of the yachting world and the center of the yachting ecosystem. We're not here because we think there's more clients here in Fort Lauderdale. The clients are, they are in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and in Palm Beach, but they're everywhere. They're in New York and LA. It's because that whole ecosystem around the client is here. The yacht management companies are here. The brokers are here. The captains are here. And these are the people that we work with, 80% of the time on the day-to-day basis, right? We work with the ecosystem and the principal. But it's the people around the principal that really matter.
And if you have to pick a spot, this is certainly a good spot. And of course, what Pier 66 has done to this property has set it up for the next 50 years.
I totally agree. Fort Lauderdale has been such an important place, but we needed also, as the boats have gotten bigger and the standard has gotten higher, we needed a place here in Fort Lauderdale that was commensurate with that. And Pier 66 is definitely that.
Right.
5-star. We have now docks. We can put 100+ meter yachts, and that's perfect for us.
The segue here a little bit. We talked before this meeting about the topic of how yachting is good for the everyday people. And granted, it's a luxury for billionaires, but in the broader benefit, what do you see coming out of particularly mega yachts, large yachts, what the economics of that and the business of that really looks like?
Well, I think you hinted at it, right? Is the most generous thing a billionaire can do, in my opinion, is buy a yacht. it's funny that the media sometimes gets that completely wrong.
They do.
They try to say, hey, look at this billionaire with his yacht. Well, if that billionaire didn't have a yacht, that 40 million or 100 million or whatever, huge amount of money would just be sitting in a bank account doing nobody any good.
Right.
But when he spends it and buys a yacht, he's not giving, the old phrase, don't give a man a fish, give him a fishing pole and teach him to fish. He's giving thousands of us a job. I have a job and a whole career, right? Because guys buy yachts, right? And then I have a family here, right? And I have kids in school, and, you have a job and she has a job. And, the people watching this video probably all have jobs. These guys buy yachts. It's the most generous thing they can do is give us all jobs.
It's probably the least wise use of their money if you really look.
Exactly. If they wanted to be Mr. Scrooge, they could sit on their money and not be shamed by the media and leave it in the bank account. But that's the selfish thing to do. The generous thing to do is go buy a yacht and go cruise everywhere and employ us all. And we're so grateful to each one of these guys that do it.
Well, Timothy, I'm glad to hear you say that, because when I talk about what I call the sacred Trinity in our industry, and what that is, in my opinion, in conversations I have, is the asset, the crew, and the owner. There's three elements. If they're healthy, you got a healthy industry.
Yeah.
If any one of those is sick, then you're in trouble. And so when you look at the high net worth individual that is the yacht owner, he's got choices. If he's passionate about the ocean, wants to go yachting, he can pull out his checkbook and charter a boat.
Yeah.
And he'll go have a good time for a week or two and let everybody else deal with the bullshit. Or
It's cheaper.
keep saying,
Yeah.
or he can say, hey, I want one of these myself, and I'm going to go through the whole process. I'm gonna sit with a naval architect and a designer and an interior person. I'm gonna find a shipyard, and a lot of these guys love that process.
Absolutely.
And they spend the money and they create the asset, and that asset's out on the ocean, and every place that asset goes, every time it ties up to a dock, what is the economic impact?
He's helping people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's my job and the other people in the client-facing side of the shipbuilding job to make sure that that's a nice experience. You just said a lot of guys love that.
Yeah.
We got to make sure, and that's what we have to always keep in front of mind, is we can't just build, our job isn't just to build, ships. Our job isn't just to build really good yachts. Our job is actually make the whole process a pleasant one for the clients so that they come back and do it again. Tell their friends.
And see these, because their friends oftentimes can afford to do the same thing. They just, yes.
At the level which we deal, so much of our business comes through references. Even if the inquiry comes at first through some other source, almost always they reach out to another friend who's built a boat with us or built a boat with a competitor and said, hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
What should I do? So it's your reputation matters more than any marketing campaign, any boat show. Your reputation, how you treated the last client, is everything.
It's been a little while since I've been on a Lürssen.
We got to fix that.
Well, let's fix that. Sure. I'll be in Monaco with you. We'll take a look at one
All right.
or two. I was recently on Breakthrough
Okay.
over in Amsterdam, and a couple takeaways, which I thought was phenomenal, besides the incredible investment I see Van Lent putting into their facility.
New facility.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
We should take notes over here, right?
Yeah.
That boat, first of all, the whole hydrogen-powered hybrid technology piece, I literally put my hands on the hydrogen fuel cells, and
Amazing.
yeah, it was amazing, and saw the real estate it took up, but saw the infrastructure they built into there. I was talking to a good friend of mine that used to work with me years ago. He's in Denmark, and his company is in hydrogen fuel cells, and they actually had been negotiating with Lürssen to sell their technology. They were not successful. Lürssen went with a different company, but I understand Lürssen has a kind of a different approach to the way you're doing hydrogen compared to what Fedship did, which I don't know that matters so much one way or another, as long as, looking at new technologies and looking at alternative fuels and all that, which is cool. But that's not really one to go. That's cool. And that's a hot topic with all that. But what really I found profound was the crew accommodations on board Breakthrough.
Really?
2 decks of crew. Each crew suite looked like a hotel suite.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness, Timothy, you could do Pilates
Oh, really?
in the room without even going near your berths. Each room carried 2 crew. I thought it was phenomenal. And the point I'm trying to make is, first of all, they can do it because they got the real estate. It's a big boat.
Yeah. When you get that much beam, what happens is there's an allotment amount of square meters that you have to have.
Yep.
And if you stay with the central corridor, which clearly Fetchit did, you end up with these accommodations, these crew accommodations that are bigger than regulation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, regulation's only what, 3 square meters or
I
something?
can't remember. Yeah. It's an interesting tidbit, actually. I wanted to hear about your impression of Breakthrough because it's an interesting tidbit because it's reflective that Breakthrough is the beamiest yacht that Fetchit's ever built. And they haven't quite figured out that actually when you get to that beam, you don't stay with a central corridor. And they hadn't. I find that fascinating.
But here's my takeaway, and this is just, maybe it's a little naivety on my part. I don't think so. But when going back to the holy trinity of what's good for the industry, good for the owners, good for the crew, creating space is, I think, essential to the well-being and the way crew effectively work. When you get into conversations individually over a cocktail or just whatever, whether you're talking to an owner or whether you're talking to a captain or whether you're talking to crew, you start hearing the same thing. Most owners will tell you one of the most difficult aspects of owning a yacht is the crew. Even when they hand it over to the yacht management company, it is still the crew piece of it. And when you talk to captains, they're talking about the challenges they have. And when you get in these big boats, it's just exponential. It's no longer 8 or 10 or 12 crew. Now it's 40 or 50 or 60.
Right.
Yeah, it's like,
right.
Yeah. And I'm about to do an interview with a young lady. Not she's been in the game for 12 years. She's out now for 4 years. She's in Mexico, and she's going to talk about her experiences. And she was mostly on 50 to 70 meter yachts, but not all good experiences.
Yeah.
And tough conversation we're going to have. But the point is that if we look at our industry, I think the crew piece right now is sick. And what I mean by that is there is a culture of don't talk, don't tell. There's a safety culture that is being questioned and challenged. And so while I can sit and talk to people in yacht management and in brokerage and in charter management, and I talk to that group of industry professionals, I also want to start talking to naval architects, yacht designers, and shipyards to start asking the question, in yacht design and construction, are there things we could or should be doing to create a better work environment for the crew to give them the safety that they need, the privacy they need, and then the ability to support the owners the way the owners need to be supported? Because again, going back to what we're talking about earlier, if these owners don't feel respected, they don't feel like they're having the experience they want, they're hung out.
Yeah.
And the crew has a big impact on that. So
Absolutely.
I'm sitting here in this space now going into my 5th decade in this industry, saying, what can we do? What can I do as a voice to start getting people thinking about this?
True.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question. And I would love to go back to Breakthrough. But for now, it's interesting. There's a young university student reached out to me a few months ago. She is studying Savannah College of Art and Design, a great school. And she's doing her thesis on that exact topic. How can we improve yacht design for crew well-being, which is ultimately there for the sake of the owner?
That's right.
And sometimes I think an owner will mistake this topic and think, you guys are spending my dollars, right? Crew well-being means more space, less space for me. It didn't have to be that way. You can use the same real estate or even less real estate with intentional, thoughtful design to not only make a nicer environment. I met with somebody a few years ago that was talking about circadian rhythms, doing lighting design that help for the crew that have to work through the night in their cabins to help with their rhythms, but also the safety piece, which you talked about, something that I think hasn't been discussed very much in our industry, but the nature of working on a yacht, especially for young women, is by nature a very dangerous place. And I think that the environment poses a lot of threats.
It does.
And so how can we think about that from a design, but also from an operational perspective to be able to provide some level of, or additional levels of safety?
Thanks, Timothy. And again, I bring it up not in the context that you and I are going to solve the problems of the world together, but there's upwards of 100,000 people are going to listen to or watch our conversation over the next couple months. And perhaps we plant a couple seeds that some more people start thinking about this piece of it and, come back with some creative ideas, how we can make a better mousetrap, create a better environment for the essential crew that we need to keep in this industry.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of improvement that can be made there. So
no question about it. I'm first to recognize that. So go back to Breakthrough, the full boat.
I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I think she's one of the most beautiful yachts ever.
She's beautiful.
RWD is great. I'm doing a few different projects with them right now. We delivered some boats recently on them. So I think they're great, but I think Breakthrough is especially beautiful exterior wise. Haven't been on board. Obviously I'm not invited on board, but I would love to hear your perspective of how she was.
She's, I don't want to say typical Dutch, but she's typical Dutch in fit and finish and some of the interior work, just beautiful. Because of my nature, I spent a lot of time in the back tender garage, back beach club areas, just the way they integrated the doors and the spaces and the salons and all of that, just gorgeous technical spaces. The only thing that I would tell you that you'd be amazed, and most people would probably agree with me, if you walk into the engine room, it's not what you're expecting on a 119-meter yacht. It's not 2 decks with mezzanines and catwalks and all that. It's a very small space. But I think that was necessary because of the size the cryogenic tanks take us, and they had to sacrifice space to get into that hybrid technology. But the layout, the owner's accommodation spaces and the guest accommodation spaces and the central staircase, and like you mentioned, is that central companionway concept throughout the boat on all decks. But it does give you the scale of the boat too. When you look down those companionways,
the way through,
you see a lot.
Yeah,
you do. The 4 peak areas are really well thought out, where the windlasses are and the technical engineering spaces up there. And just, it was, my takeaway was they built an incredibly beautiful boat. They really did.
Yeah.
I felt privileged to have that opportunity. My 15-year-old son, who's normally behind the cameras, was with me on that trip, and he got to see that. But I also say that as impressive as that boat was, the investment in their infrastructure that Van Lent did is really impressive. Because when we got the tour of that facility, we walked outside in that blessed, really warm November Dutch weather and looked just adjacent. And the gentleman I was with described how they're getting ready to build another graving dock and building there in the Amsterdam shipyard. Then he pointed across the way there, which is like the turning basin.
Right.
And they're dedicating into a new yard they're building over there. So they're
fascinating. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Wow. In fact, they just ended their contract with Savannah Yachting Center because they're moving all of their refit work over to
Focusing on Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Really.
So yeah, their focus now is just bringing the fleet back across the Atlantic and when it needs to be refit and do it there.
Well, I think that kudos to their shareholder who's made that investment in that facility. And honestly, I haven't been there, but it looks gorgeous and everything I understand about it. It's apparently very efficient in terms of its energy and so forth. So kudos to them.
Yeah. No, it's great to see the investment because, and again, I think that my takeaway is to speak to our industry here in North America and kind of challenge us as a yachting entity here in North America to emulate what's being done there. Obviously, you got to justify the expense with knowing you're going to fill a facility. And I'm not a big believer that, build and they will come. Great movie, but, you do have to have some economic feasibility in play. But when you look at what was done, for instance, up in Savannah at Savannah Yachting Center, they have the graving dock and they've got a nice facility, but it's not fully enclosed. It doesn't bring all of the asset that you see in just that one facility in Amsterdam into play. And that's the biggest facility we really have here on the East Coast of the United States.
Well, it's an interesting topic because I actually wrote a paper about this some years ago. We talked about how there's yacht building in Germany, there's yacht building in the Netherlands, and there's yacht building in Italy and in Turkey.
Yeah.
If you look within Germany, the yacht building is actually concentrated in 2 towns. In Bremen, where we're headquartered, Abiking is literally across the creek.
Yeah.
And then in Rendsburg, up in northern Germany, where our other facility is, and Novoskrug is literally across the creek. Now that's weird. In all of Germany, a very large country, you have the competitors all within a stone's throw of the other competitor.
Right.
And you go to the Netherlands, right? Or you go to Italy, you have the Via Reggio. You've been there, I'm sure. And you see there's like 5 yacht builders all right there. You see, you have to ask the question, why would all the yacht builders stick together like a third world like market where, you know, all the tire vendors are on one street and microwave vendors are on another street? Why are they consolidated together? And the reason is because in the end, shipbuilding is not about your facilities. Shipbuilding is 100% to do with your workforce.
That's right.
So if we wanted to build up a shipbuilding here in the States, it's all about the workforce. The facilities can come later. It's a great investment to be made, but that is not the key ingredient. It's the workforce. And we have it here in South Florida. Now, building yachts in South Florida, trying to find a little space for the land, it's expensive. I remember years ago when there was an investor that bought Christensen, and he had some land in Tennessee or something.
Yeah, he was about the adjacent property to him up in Tennessee. He's going to try to do Tennessee. And I was just like,
who's advising this guy? Because it's not about facilities, it's about workforce. And there is no workforce there, right? There's no experienced shipbuilders. So kudos to these companies because Fetchship does have the experience, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, it's the longevity of your workforce of constantly improving themselves, improving their systems is what puts out fantastic yachts. And that's where Fetchship has continued to thrive, what Lürssen thrives in.
And look what happens in those facilities. Reggio is a great example. Amsterdam, Mokum, these are all other good examples of hubs where then all the subcontractors set up shop all in. Fort Lauderdale is a great example. Then you have LMC and you've got Bradford's and you've got Directors and you've got these shipyards here. And all around are all the subcontractors, the little businesses that have gone into business, support all of this work, and then have grown into bigger and bigger businesses.
That's so right. It's, you know, even though Fetchship and the Ocean Co, us Lürssen, we all like to talk about how we build a yacht. The reality is, if you look at the amount of man hours that go into a yacht, how many man hours are done by Lürssen employees or by Fetchship direct employees? And the Fetchship likes to say that it's kind of a bit of a, you know, smoke and mirrors situation. Still, a huge percentage, if not a slight majority of the man hours are from third party, no matter who you are, right? Because in the end, you don't actually pull your own cable. There's a third party vendor that pulls the cable. You don't design and build engine, you buy those from somebody. You design and build the air conditioning, you buy that from somebody, and then they come and install it, right? You might engineer your AC outlets, but you didn't interiors. You know, all of us have shares and some interior manufacturers, but still most of the interior is all third party.
Contracted.
That's right. Paint. Some people have paint crew in-house, but nobody has enough paint crew to do all of the painting. So all the fairing, which is a lot of manual labor, subcontracted.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's that ecosystem, and your quality is only as good as your ecosystem.
That's right. That's understandable.
Your reliability, are those subcontractors staying solvent? So can they do it well? Can they do it on time? And can they not go bankrupt? You know,
all legitimate questions.
Yeah. And so that's where that experience of mature subcontractor base is fundamental.
Love it. So Timothy, answer this if you would. What do you see is the future of Lürssen over the next few years? Where do you see the shipyard? I can't imagine it as a status quo proposition. You've got so much going on.
Lürssen has been built up. It's 150 years old, but the yachting business is really only 20, 30 years old, right? And it's really Michael and Peter and Fridtjof Schmidt that built up the yachting business. So, you know, we're all kind of standing on those guys' shoulders. But we have a very strong future. And the reason for it is obviously we have this fantastic shareholder, the Lürssen family. But also there's this generation of guys that are my age that are kind of stepping into the leadership of Lürssen. We have a new CEO now, Justus Reinke, and managing directors that we're all like early 40s, you know? And these guys, I mean, we have a senior project manager, guys, head of production, all these guys that are young, a lot of them have PhDs, the depth of really deeply competent people that are very good. I mean, impressively smart inside of Lürssen. The talent pool is wide and very deep. And they're all like, late 30s, early 40s. It's that
Everything's possible.
there's decades ahead of us of a very strong, skilled workforce, right? So
Love that.
doesn't mean that there aren't going to be crises, because there will definitely be crises, and how those are navigated, we'll have to see as they come.
Right.
Peter and his cousin and Michael have navigated many of them. And so hopefully, this next generation is able to continue to, show wisdom. And those older guys aren't gone, they're still around, still providing some guidance. But because of that talent pool, I'm very positive about the future. The market, obviously, as we all know, for big yachts is just continuing to explode. Crazy. Other companies want to get in that space. You see Ocean Co. trying to build some bigger boats. Fedship's trying to build some breakthrough, right?
Yeah, 119.
But even then, 119 meters and Lürssen World, it's pretty average, right? Fedship is like, oh my gosh, everybody, look at this thing we've done, which is great. I don't want to undermine that. No, that's for time. It's a real accomplishment they've done. But the demand for the very big boats seems to be strong. The money in the Americas has always been here, but the appetite for spending enormous amounts of money on big boats has grown. In my days at Fedship, we started selling 90-meter boats on a regular basis. In 5.5 years, we sold probably 8, sort of somewhere around 3,000-ton boats, right? Yeah, and the time it was like mind-blowing. Right. That we were selling these like 3,000-ton boats. They just seemed like nobody has ever, there was a few boats over 65 meters owned by Americans, but it wasn't regular. But now, and so that became normal. Now, all of a sudden, we see these 100+ meter boats being ordered by Americans, and on a regular basis. So again, we see this acceptance of the money has always been in America, but this acceptance amongst Americans to own a bigger, very expensive yacht has kind of gone up. And because of that, I'm very bullish on both that we have the deep leadership and talent pool within Lürssen to continue to be competitive. And I see the demand here on the American side being resilient to continue to grow into the larger yachts for years to come.
I would go out on a limb too and say that if you are a high net worth individual and you're going to spend that kind of money on an asset like a 100+ meter, 120+ meter yacht, 140+ meter yacht, you'd probably want to go someplace where they've done it and they've got the depth of organization to know that if you run into trouble, they're going to be there for you.
Yeah.
Because you can go to a lot of places in this world and have them start laying up a hull and building a 150-meter yacht if you want to do that. But what are you going to get for your money? And do you have the security of knowing that shipyard they're going to be there and deliver for you, after you've taken delivery and when you have your first real issue with that boat, should you have an issue with the boat. And so I think that's probably one of the, benefits to being a company like Lürssen is you have that ability to deliver that confidence.
Absolutely. I mean, you asked before why Northern Europe versus Italy. Famously, a very competent or very experienced Italian shipyard built a few boats over 100 meter, I believe. And, they struggled. They lost money on them, the boats. And it wasn't because those are bad people. It's just that without experience, it's really hard to show up and get it done. And so for the reason,
good friend of mine who's captain built one of those boats.
Okay.
And I was around when that was going on and I listened to the challenges and ultimately he got a decent boat.
Yeah.
But, it was not a painless proposition.
Yeah. But I mean, how could it be?
Right.
I don't care who's involved in the project. If you haven't done it before, you're doing something for the first time. It's hard.
Yeah, it is.
And building a ship, even if you've done it many times before, is hard for it to come out well, So we have an advantage there.
Yes.
One of the things, though, that I missed a little bit that we talked about, referenced 100+ meters so much. Listen, also, our bread and butter is still on that 80 to 100 meter range. And we're building some beautiful boats. The model, we can't see it for the people watching TV. Right over there is Haven. She is so cool. We designed her in-house. So one of the first Lürssens. It is the first Lürssen that was kind of designed in-house, and probably one of the last. But beautiful yacht. And she's a departure. She's a California young client. She's a departure from the norm in that he was like, look, I don't go on my yacht to be inside. I don't get these yachts that have all this interior volume. I want maximum outside space. So she's a tri-deck. She's the longest tri-deck ever built.
Wow.
And she's 2,100 gross tons, but just, it's a 30-meter long sun deck. Massive.
30-meter long sun deck.
40 meters long. Yeah. Main deck aft is huge with a pool. The beach club is huge. The swivel platform is huge. And it's all about active, being outside. Really cool interior. It's unfortunately I can't show the interior, but super, one of the coolest interiors ever.
That's nice.
And that boat, the reason why I highlight it is it reflects kind of like the younger generation of yacht owners, right? It's casual. It's all about being active. It's a lifestyle exterior. And we have more boats like that in the pipeline.
I love that. I love that. Because that's yachting, and that's the essence of yachting for sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is a bit of a sweet spot. It's funny how we look at 70 and 80 meters is more of a sweet spot these days in large yachts, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of cool. That's a cool Lürssen product.
This week, we just sea trialed another boat, which I can't say the name of, but you can probably look it up in the media. And it's very similar themes. Really cool.
Similar size.
Similar size, young family, cool boat, beautiful interior. We'll probably never be able to photograph it or take video.
So it says, yeah.
But it's so good, this boat. It's so good. Unfortunately, we'll probably never be able to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny you bring that up too, Tim, because when we talk about the U.S. boat building market, I've got good friends that own Delta Marine out west,
Right.
in Seattle. And you look at the fact that the Pacific Northwest has always been a hotbed of new boat construction.
Right.
And I was talking to Chris Jones, actually, second generation, and Michelle, and the challenges they've had in scaling their business. And, you know, the biggest obstacle they've had to overcome is all the NDAs that their clients have tied them up with. So they built Albatross, an amazing, 80-some meter boat that very few people know that was actually built.
Right.
They've built so many other boats. They've got 5 builds under construction right now, and they can only talk about 1 or 2 of them. So it's like the best kept secret in the U.S. yachting industry. Delta sits out there in Seattle building some of the most incredible fleet of boats that most people will never see, just because their client tends to have that level of anonymity and really doesn't want their vessels on the front covers of yachting magazines and, you know, out in front of everybody. So that is a challenge. So when you're building boats like you're describing for your clients, yeah, you're probably right. You got some incredible product that, you know exists, but nobody else will ever know exists.
You're absolutely right. And I have a lot of respect for the Jones family and for Delta. You know, like you already said, I think they build really high quality boats, and unfortunately they just don't have people don't recognize it for the quality of what they're producing out there. But, you know, that's the nature of our business. You know, people are private. If I was fortunate enough to be that wealthy to have a big yacht, I wouldn't need it to be in a boat show and everybody walking through it either. And I don't want anybody to know that I have this big boat. I probably have a lot of employees. Probably wouldn't be so happy if, you know, so there's a very, you know, deep understanding of the need for discretion.
Yes.
Lürssen, I think, has a reputation, I can tell you from practice, of probably one of the more discreet yacht builders, in that we don't publish what boats we're building or, you know, talk about who the owners are. If we're lucky that an owner allows us to photograph it, of course we will, but that doesn't happen so often.
Right.
And I think that's also part of the advantage of coming to Lürssen, is that, you know, that discretion is there. And, you know, the boats we build, you can't hide them. So we can't pit boats in there. We can't stop somebody else from flying a drone around the exterior, putting it on CPR times, because it happens every time.
Right.
And, you know, that's, so the exposure still gets there. We might be able to not talk about everything we did with the boats. Of course, these boats are pretty complex these days, but
They are works of art, and they are.
we know it.
Yes.
And it's people that are in the business that are advising clients, they know. And so the clients hear that these guys really know what they're doing.
Right. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
And that's as it should be. I love that. Well, Timothy, I think this is remarkable, going from running parasail operations in Northwest Florida to basically being the catbird seat here with Lürssen USA, Lürssen America. It's an incredible journey of yours. And if your career goes anywhere like mine did, you're just about a third of the way, halfway into it. So see what your future can look like in all of this.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, all the best with that endeavor you're looking at to build boats here in the U.S. Follow.
If we make that happen, that would be a nice way to kind of cap off what's been a pretty remarkable career I've enjoyed as well. But this is the part I'm really having a lot of fun with, if you can't tell. These conversations are interesting. They're important, I think. It's good to get this on the record, talking about our industry. And, it's fun to go back 30 years, but it's also fun to think about what's going to happen the next 30 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to chat with you. And it's amazing the interest you have, but also the excitement you have for our industry and for what we're doing. So
Love it.
thank you for reaching out and making these and recording all this.
We'll see you in Monaco.
Yeah, we'll see you in Monaco.
That'll be fun.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, and again, until the next time, by the way, Timothy, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah.
And I'm out of here.
All right. See you. Thanks again.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.